Welcome to Tech Talk, a podcast featuring employees and leaders discussing all things tech at Mutual of Omaha. Join us to learn what tech professionals can gain from a career with us. Let's talk tech.
All right, welcome everybody again to another episode of Tech Talk, sponsored by Mutual of Omaha. I'm Brian Poppy.
And I'm Shauna Dorsey.
So, Shauna, it's good to see you. What have you been watching on TV lately?
So, I'm a huge true crime fan, so I've been watching a lot of that, whether it's at the gym, making dinner, whatever. So that's my go-to. How about yours?
Yeah, I've also been watching crimes, though they're a little less true crime and more staged by the producers. I've been really into Bachelor in Paradise lately, so slowly getting caught up on that. And I know that aired over the summer, so very, very fun. And I don't know, maybe crimes against humanity would be the way to describe those rather than true crime. Right. Anyway, today we've got Jim Maxwell, Organizational Change Manager here at Mutual of Omaha. Jim's been with Mutual for 6 years, and he's had an interesting career to get here. So, Jim, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background?
Sure, Brian, and thanks, Sean and Brian, for having me. Thrilled to be here. So my background started in broadcasting. My degree is in journalism with a broadcasting major. The radio was my first love. I've done television behind the scenes, behind the camera and television, a lot of announcing and radio, so a lot of production background. And then I transferred those skills to the corporate arena because, frankly, it paid a lot better. If you've ever worked in radio, you would know what I meant by that. I actually took a pay cut to go work in radio after waiting tables for 4 years in college. So that brought me to several opportunities. I ended up working for some advertising agencies. I've been a creative director. I have worked on commercials. I've worked on talk shows. I've worked on other podcasts. So a wide variety of things. And my corporate journey took me to Mutual of Omaha eventually. And I started out on the agency side, supporting our agents in the field in the Northeast region. And then I moved to the dark side, which is the IT of Mutual, which we refer to as Information Services, or IS. And I've been part of that organization for 5 years or so. And it has been outstanding. I loved the culture on both sides of the fence. It's wonderful to work there, and I've had a lot of opportunities, some of which we're about to discuss.
Great, Jim. So can you tell us how you're able to incorporate humor into what you do at Mutual of Omaha?
Well, it's a great question, Shauna, and it is a little bit loaded. So my background, I have a comedy background, which helps. So I've been writing comedy for almost 25 years now. I published a book called Dad Logic, which is essentially all the comedy I couldn't use in comedy clubs. Mm-hmm. Stand-up is very different than writing for a book or writing for a presentation. But I have done stand-up, and I currently write for a handful of stand-up comedians. So the organizational thoughts that go through your head when you're writing comedy are the same as any other form of communication. Mm-hmm. So when you're talking about things in corporate America and how you're going to incorporate humor there, it's the same questions you're going to ask yourself whether you're developing any kind of content. And that's what resonates with your audience, understanding your audience. And that means understanding their pain points. Comedy often derives from the pain points people feel in life. And I'm not saying you accentuate the negative and not the positive, but if you start with the negatives, that's what resonates with people. So you have to ask yourself questions if you're looking at corporate America. What is it that frustrates me about what's going on? What is it that scares me? What makes me angry? What makes me nervous? And usually you take those concepts, build it into essentially what keeps people up at night. And if you meet them there with humor, they're willing to listen to just about anything you say because you've taken the time to tell them, I want to understand what it is that drives you. And now I'm going to stick my neck out a little bit and maybe make fun of that. Mm-hmm. People appreciate that more than you know, whether you succeed or fail in making them laugh. At least you showed you care enough to understand where they are and meet them where they are.
Jim, that's great. This little bit about finding the pain points and then poking on those. Perfect. So as people are thinking about how to incorporate humor into their day-to-day activities, there's probably a good chance they're going to run across a mistake or two. Tell me a little bit about the common mistakes that people might make when trying to incorporate humor.
Sure. There's a lot of mistakes people make. Just remember that funny isn't funny on its own. There has to be a nugget of truth to it. So anything that you've walked away from remembering that really made you laugh was probably something that resonated with you emotionally. But the person who said that made that joke universal enough for you and everyone else in the room to understand. What people often mistakenly do is make the comedy too personal. They're trying to reference something that only they and maybe a handful of their closest friends or family members could understand. So you might be talking about Uncle Dave, who always embarrasses you at family events because you understand the context behind that. But if you're trying to weave that in front of a larger audience, you need to make that more universal. I can't stress that enough. And then, of course, in corporate humor, funny at the expense of individuals is not acceptable. You can get away with that in a comedy club when you're doing crowd work. But in corporate America, find a more universal way to address that. And the best way, there are really two easy ways to do that. If you're stuck going, well, that's great advice, Jim, but how do I actually do that? One, make fun of yourself. Make yourself the target. Self-effacement helps relax the rest of the crowd because they know, well, he's focusing on himself, not us. That's funny. And let's move on, because if this person is authentic enough to make fun of themselves, it's okay for us to relax. And then the second point is get leadership in on the joke. I can't stress that enough. Mutual has a great culture and is willing to laugh at itself. But if you're in a culture that maybe isn't ready to laugh at itself, get leadership in on the joke. Because once people see leaders poking fun at themselves, or maybe we're getting a laugh at their expense, all of a sudden the room loosens up, and you'd be surprised how much more amenable people are to laughing, to understanding what you're saying. And by the way, it's not just about the comedy. It's about all the content that follows that, no matter how dry it is. You've demonstrated your authenticity. Therefore, you have credibility with that audience. Mm-hmm. And then another mistake people make is assuming that comedy club clean is corporate clean. And the reason I specifically mention that is it's not that they're getting up and trying to do stand-up in meetings, but I often attend demos where people will share videos of stand-up comedian sets. But what they don't understand is most of that, or an SNL skit, is not appropriate for corporate America. Yes, it's funny. I'm laughing, but you have to understand that much of what that comedy entails is really not corporate clean. So just keep that in mind. People do it honestly. They make the mistake. There's no evil intent. But stay away from the production stuff that was aired, even if it was aired on the networks, because it's probably not corporate clean. And again, if you're trying to do humor yourself, I think we should pat those people on the back and applaud for them, because when you stick your neck out like that, that's hard to do. You're putting yourself out there, and if it fails, it's okay. But if you are putting yourself out there and you're trying to do humor and it didn't work, don't wait for the laugh. Just move on and keep going. If you stand there and acknowledge all the failures, or do the worst thing that one person who is a public speaker, whom I work with regularly and have to tell him over and over again, because he does this, he thinks the crowd didn't get the joke and feels compelled to explain the joke to the audience. Don't do that. A, they got the joke. And B, if you do that, they're going to tell you exactly why they didn't think it was funny. And then finally, if humor is new to your corporation, take baby steps. Don't go from 0 to 60 in one meeting. I had someone at Mutual comment on a recent meeting saying, it'd be interesting to see how Jim's presentation skills have enhanced over the last couple of years. And I laughed because I know what they meant by it. It was a very nice compliment. But at the same time, I thought, well, I haven't changed a bit. I just had to introduce comedy a little bit at a time. And when you're at a culture like Mutual, you have to do that, earn some respect, earn the ability to be, to exercise autonomy, and then take it from there, add a little bit more each time until eventually one day you're like, wow, how did we get here? This is really fun. Yeah, it is. But we took baby steps. So that's just a recommendation if you don't have the benefit of a culture as wonderful as ours.
That's awesome. So how do you think fun and humor impact the culture of an organization?
Well, there's nothing more defacing in a good way, right? Humor brings the room together. Just like food brings the room together, right? We can all argue over many things in this world. But the one thing we can all agree on, if somebody sets some really good food down in the conference room, we're all going. Or if you smell something that's in the kitchen, you're going to go up there and talk, whether you want to talk to those in-laws or not, because the food is good. Humor brings people together. Yeah. It also tells the audience that you care enough about them and give them credit for having a brain, that they're going to understand that they maybe needed a laugh at that point. Not maybe, they do. Everybody needs a laugh at every given point of the day, because we all have day jobs. We're all dealing with stress. And there's nothing more illuminating and relaxing than just a good laugh, right? It's an involuntary thing. It loosens you up for the rest of the meeting. And it's not that the rest of the meeting is all comedy. I'm not saying the meeting should all be yucks. But when you've already demonstrated that level of authenticity that humor brings to the table, that vibe carries through the rest of the meeting, and people resonate more. They listen more, because people don't always remember exactly what you say, but they do remember how you made them feel. And if you make them feel good, they're going to leave that meeting, and guess what? They're going to come back the next time.
Yeah, that's great. So Jim, with that type of culture in mind, like that's the type of thing that you're trying to build. Can you give us a few examples of how you've seen that happen here at Mutual of Omaha?
Sure. There are many. Well, corporate America, it has no shortage of examples of things you can make fun of. We've all been there, right? We've all been part of cultures. It's never perfect. It is not perfect at Mutual too, right? We have many things that we can poke fun at. The secret is understanding that when you're in a culture like Mutual's, you will be granted autonomy to do things like incorporate humor into various meetings, events, and things of that nature. However, you still have to demonstrate the ability to be a good steward of that humor. Keep it corporate clean, not call people out specifically. We're not here to hurt feelings. We're not here to bully people with humor. We're here to loosen people up. But the beautiful thing about Mutual's culture is once you introduce that and people get a flavor for that, this is a company and a culture full of extremely intelligent people. And they not only care about the customers, coworkers here truly care about each other. And once they realize, hey, this is something that resonates with people and people like this, well, you'll get the green light in our culture to do more. More is always better, right? Not too much. Like we've said before, we don't want meetings. We don't want 60-minute meetings that are 58 minutes of comedy and then 2 minutes of business. We still have business to conduct. But you have to show people we're willing to be human. We're willing to be as authentic as our culture is. And there's nothing more authentic than introducing humor and getting a laugh out of people.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking or reflecting as you were talking on the Funny at Work or Fun at Work video that was in one of our broader organization meetings, and how I was literally crying laughing about it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. First of all, I'm glad you loved it so much. However, crying at it might not be what I originally intended, Shauna, but that's okay. Oh, that's great. I did a funny video and it made someone cry. So we have a lot of things in corporate America. I'm not just talking about Mutual, but as I said before, there are plenty of bears to poke in corporate America. And in a virtual world, sometimes living virtually through software isn't always smooth as silk. I think we can all agree. And there are certain things in virtual meetings that quite simply drive people crazy. They're eye-rolling moments. And we as adults, I'm guilty of it too, we're used to working virtually, and sometimes we forget our professionalism in meetings, and people do things during virtual meetings that aren't professional. So we had one option. One option was to create a video on etiquette, on how to properly conduct yourself during a virtual meeting. But who's going to watch that, right? No one's going to watch that. That's a nice video, Jim. I will never watch that. So what we did was I flipped it upside down and said, well, let's make it funny. So let's go back to what I said. Let's see if I followed my own advice. Yes, I did. What are the pain points? What is it about virtual meetings that are driving people crazy? I know, because we get survey results on one of the largest meetings we hold, which involves over 1,000 people. So that's a pretty scientific feedback. And I got plenty of pain points from that. And what I did was, instead of ignoring them and ignoring the elephant in the room, I attacked each and every one, but with humor. So how do you do that? You take the pain point, and then of course you take it to the absurd, right? To an absurd level that no one would ever do. but it's funny. And you're making the point that, yes, if we went down this slippery slope, it could get this bad. So why even start? Let's behave. Let's be adults. So it's funny. And I'm glad you thought it was funny, but I never do funny without a purpose in corporate America. It has to be funny with a purpose. I do a lot of videos that people say are funny, and that's great, but they also learn something from it. But you know what the secret is, Shauna? They didn't realize they were learning because they were too busy laughing. And that's a great way to learn, because you remember that a lot longer when you laughed.
Yeah. So true.
Jim, I guess that's what makes you a great organizational change manager. So thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate having you. It's been another episode of Tech Talk, again, hosted by Brian Poppy
And Shauna Dorsey. Thanks for joining us.
Have a great day, everyone.